Everyone talks about people leaving Illinois, but what most people don't realize is a lot of people aren't actually leaving the state at all. They're leaving certain Chicago suburbs. Now, some of these suburbs have lost thousands and thousands of residents over the past decade, and the reasons why are actually very different depending on where you look. So today we're going to break down the Chicago suburbs losing population, why people are leaving, and where many of these people are actually moving to instead. And some of the reasons might actually surprise you. Let's start with the south suburbs of Chicago, because this is where some of the largest population declines in the metro area have been happening. Places like Chicago Heights, Harvey, Dalton, and Calumet City have all seen population numbers slowly decline over time. Let's talk about what these numbers actually look like though. Harvey went from 25,000 residents in 2010 to 20,000 in 2020, and now it's estimated around 19,000. That's a 25% drop. Chicago Heights went from just over 30,000 down to 27,500 in 2020, and now it sits closer to 26,000. That's roughly a 13% decline. And it's not just these two places. Places like Dalton and Calumet City have also seen population declines, not quite as dramatic, closer to 5 to 10% over the same time period. So this isn't just one town. This is a pattern across several south suburbs. Now, to be clear, these are still communities where people live, work, and they raise families. But several trends have pushed residents to relocate. And one of the biggest reasons starts with Illinois and everything it's kind of known for, property taxes. Illinois already has some of the highest property taxes in the country, but in many south suburban communities, the bigger issue becomes the relationship between the home values and the property taxes that are attached to them. For example, in several of these areas, you can find homes priced around $150,000 to $200,000. Now on the surface, that sounds incredibly affordable, but when you start to look at the tax bill, the numbers can tell a very, very different story here. So it's not uncommon to see property taxes of $6,000, $7,000, even $10,000 a year on a home valued around $200,000. So while the purchase price might look very attractive, the tax burden relative to the value of the home is extremely high. And for many homeowners, that's become a major factor when deciding whether they want to stay or kind of move. Now, when you couple that with the next major factor that affects these south suburbs, it starts to make the picture a bit clearer. But before we dive into that, if you're thinking of relocating to Chicago or the suburbs, this is what I do every single day. So feel free to give me a call here or sign up for my weekly newsletter right here. Let's dive into something very important here, and that's proximity to the next state over. Many of these communities sit right near the Indiana border, which means relocating across state lines can kind of be incredibly easy for them. Someone living in a south suburb can move just 15 to 30 minutes away to places like Munster, Dyer, Schererville, St. John, and they often find lower property taxes, newer housing, and they can still be within commuting distance of Chicago. So instead of leaving the region entirely, many people simply pick up and move across the state line and enjoy the lower cost of living. Now, I remember selling homes in Linwood, and to go to Jewel or to grab lunch, I just crossed right into Schererville. It was just 5 to 10 minutes. And it sounds small, but that's when you realize how close that line actually is. I'd have buyers come and want to build and stay in Illinois, but once they saw the numbers like the property taxes, the home prices, it didn't always make sense to them anymore. So they just started shopping right over the border. Now, over the past couple years, some of these south suburbs have gotten a lot of attention in the news, and you probably already know where I'm going to go with this one. This is a situation involving the mayor in Dalton, which was not only covered by the news, but YouTubers like Tommy G and many more online. And when something like that gets picked up across multiple platforms, it brings a lot more attention to the area, and not always in a positive light. Now, one situation alone isn't going to make someone move, but it can affect how people feel about a town. And I've personally had people tell me they were considering other areas because of that uncertainty. And when you combine that with higher property taxes, older housing, and everything else we just talked about, it can start influencing people's decisions. Especially for buyers who are comparing multiple areas and states right here. But here's where the story changes. Because if you go north or northwest of Chicago, there are suburbs that are seeing slight population declines, but the reasons have nothing to do with taxes or headlines like we just talked about. These are places like Schaumburg, Palatine, Arlington Heights, Mount Prospect. They have all seen population declines in the recent years. But these are very desirable suburbs with strong home values still. So what's actually causing the population number to drop? The first reason is actually pretty simple. Most of these suburbs are completely built out. A lot of these northwest suburbs saw most of their major growth in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And that's when these big subdivisions were being built. That's when families were moving in, some population numbers were growing fast. But today, there's just not much land left to build on here. So unlike areas further west where you're still seeing construction going up every year, these suburbs really don't have that same pipeline of new residents rushing in. And when you remove new construction, population growth kind of naturally slows down. And in some cases, it starts to decline. Now, another major factor that plays a role here is demographics. Many homeowners in these suburbs bought their homes 30 or even 40 years ago. And back then, those homes probably had 2 parents, 3 kids, sometimes even extended family living here. But today, these same homes might just have 1 or 2 people left living in them. The kids have grown up, they've moved out, and now they've got entire neighborhoods where household sizes are shrinking. So even though the neighborhood itself is still thriving, the number of people living here is slowly going down. And then you have the next piece of the puzzle. Who's actually moving in next? Because when these homes do hit the market, they're often way more expensive than they were years ago. And for a lot of younger buyers, that creates kind of a barrier to entry for them. And part of that just comes down to how different things are today. What used to be a 1-income household now often takes 2. And with costs like childcare, a lot of people are choosing to have fewer kids, or they're waiting longer. I mean, even personally, childcare has gone from around $600 a month to me to over $1,500. So even when homes do turn over, they're often replacing larger households with smaller ones. And that's how you can have a suburb that's still high in demand, but slowly seeing a population decline. Now, before we hop into our last point, if you're finding yourself having questions about the Chicago market, give me a call or sign up for my weekly emails here, where I keep you updated on the market, local shops, places to check out, and so much more. So if some suburbs are losing residents, where are they going? In the Chicago area, a lot of the growth has been happening further west and southwest. Places like Plainfield, Oswego, Yorkville, Hampshire, and a lot of these are only 30 to 45 minutes away. These areas have new construction, larger homes, and room with all the land that they still have left to build on, which allows them to bring in new residents year after year. So while headlines are often saying, people are leaving Illinois, the reality is it's kind of more complicated than that. Some Chicago suburbs are losing residents because of the taxes, housing costs, or their location. Others are simply aging communities that are fully built out. And understanding those trends can give you a much better picture of how the Chicago housing market is kind of evolving now. And if you're thinking about moving to the Chicago suburbs, then watch this next video where I go over the pros and cons of moving here. And I'll see you there.